A reading now from Matthew's Gospel, the 5th chapter. Listen for the word of the Lord. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God indeed. So here we are today looking at the Sermon on the Mount and Jesus' beginning of that amazing and wonderful sermon, the Beatitudes. And we are kind of wrapping up one sermon series and also at the same time launching into a new one. Those of you who've been here the last couple of weeks, you know that we've been talking about this progression that we often go through. It's a spiritual progression, but it's a progression through life that we go through, this cycle. It's called many things by different people, different scholars, different theologians. I've been using the terminology Richard Rohr, a Franciscan priest, uses. An author and lecturer. He uses the terms order, disorder, and reorder. And it's a cycle that we go through in life. We find ourselves in very orderly times where things just kind of are structured and smooth, and then we hit bumps in the road that shakes that up and shakes us up. That's the disorder that we go through. And then reorder is when things kind of evolve into something new on the other side of those bumps and bruises of life. And it's not only a progression that we go through, but it's also an orientation that we find people kind of gravitate towards seeing things in an orderly way or a disorderly way, or maybe even in a reorderly way, which is our hope. Our hope is to get to reorder because we see that Jesus is doing some reorder here. Jesus is not coming along and saying, look, the ways that things have been and the ways that things are just great, keep it up and go back to heaven, right? There's something else happening here. And in Matthew, this Sermon on the Mount, it starts almost at the very, very, very beginning. He's gathered his disciples. He's been baptized. He's gathered his disciples. He's done a little bit here and there, but in doing what he's done, he's gathered a crowd. People are following him. They're interested in him. And so this is his first big public proclamation, right? He goes to the top of this mountain or rise, this hill, and he speaks to them. And he tells them, this is what we're going to be about. And it's a reordering of things, isn't it? Because this is not the order of the world. This is not the order of things. It's a reorder of things. Blessed are the poor in spirit, those who mourn, the meek, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers, those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. You, when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. That's not the order of the world. It wasn't in Jesus' time, and it's still, we're trying to see it. We're trying to get there in so many ways, but it still isn't, right? Those aren't the things that typically get rewarded. Those aren't the things that we typically seek. Those aren't the kinds of services that we're willing to pay for that are advertised on television. This is a massive reorder happening. Jesus is trying to open our eyes to a different way of seeing, of living, of being, of approaching life. It's a reorder of grand proportions. And Paul, one of the, often considered the sort of the first Christian theologian. Paul was the one who came along and began to reflect on what happened, right? And put words to it. And he wrote to the churches saying, this is what it means that Jesus came. And so Paul is on board with this reordering that Jesus was teaching. And he's talking about the foolishness of the cross. That is the power of God. This is a reordering of things too, isn't it? Because he's talking about, God says, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise. God has made foolish the wisdom of the world. You hear that? That's the order of the world. What the world recognizes as wise and orderly, God is coming in and throwing that away and establishing a new wisdom, a new order, a reorder of things. Jews demand signs. Greeks desire wisdom. We proclaim Christ crucified. Who worships somebody hanging on a cross? It's a reorder of things. It's a reorder, a reimagining, a re-understanding. We're coming across the other side of this disorder, this journey, this valley that Christ walked through, and we walked with him, and seeing that there is something here that challenges us, as disorder always does, but encourages us to a new vision, a new understanding, a new hope. Not that kind of New Hope Star Wars fans. And for us, to hear, okay, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, this may sound like good news to us, or it might not. But I will tell you, for the crowds of people that Jesus was talking to, if they really understood what he was saying, it had to sound like good news, because he was talking to the poor in spirit. He was talking to the meek. He was talking to those who were mourning. He was talking to those who thirsted and hungered desperately for righteousness to be done, justice to rain down. He was talking to them. And he's talking to us. And there are parts of us that are ready for that reordering of things, and there are parts of us that may not be ready for it. And that's the trick. We have to be ready to accept what God wants to do in our hearts, in our lives, in our minds, because it will be something new. And it will be something great. But it will require accepting some of that disorienting that happens to get there. Order, remember, we've been saying all along, order is good. God created order. an orderly world out of chaos, right? But disorder is helpful because we need to be challenged to grow. Disorder can even be a little fun sometimes. We talked about that last week. But reorder is our hope. Reorder is our hope because that's God sanctifying us, teaching us, helping us grow and learn, get closer to God in relationship to Christ. We can cling to our order that's incomplete, our orderly way of seeing the world, or we can merely act in rejection of that order that maybe others suggest. But if we learn what order and disorder will teach us and what God is speaking through them, we can get to a new understanding. Begin to understand the blessings that Christ is talking about. To learn, to grow, to adapt, to change, to get better, to be sanctified, we have to be stirred from comfort. We have to be stirred from complacency. We have to be challenged in our pride. That's disorder. But on the other side of that comes that new learning, comes that reordering of things. And if we are willing to accept that, if we're willing to go with and to walk with God through that, we can be ready for that new and glorious thing. And God is always doing something new. Isn't that wonderful? And so we move now into our vision series. For the rest of the month, we're going to be talking about a vision for the church, a vision for our community, a reorder of things that God is calling us to proclaim and live into. And we get to do that together. I'm excited about it. I hope you will be. There's always a little bit of, a little bit of discomfort with learning new things and trying new things, but it is so worth it to get to the wonderful new things that God is doing. I'm going to leave you one final image, a story of reorder, what it looks like, how beautiful it is when it happens. This is a story that Jill Duffield tells, but it's actually a story that she's retelling from someone named Brian Stevenson, who tells this story. Stevenson founded the National Memorial for Peace and Justice that memorializes the victims of lynching. At the memorial, there are jars of dirt dug from the sites where these murders occurred. Stevenson shared the story of an African American woman who participated in this project. She was on her hands and knees digging dirt and placing it in a jar at one of these sites when a white man in a truck slowed down and looked at her. He drove past, turned around, and stopped. He asked her what she was doing. She said she felt compelled to tell him the truth despite her fear. He got out of the truck and asked if he could help her. She offered him the trowel. He declined and dug with his hands. Together, they put the dirt in the jar. She noticed tears streaming down his face, and she asked if he was okay. He said he feared his ancestors may have participated in the very lynching she was memorializing. She cried with him. They took pictures of each other, holding the jar, memorializing a moment of unexpected understanding. Hope and reconciliation. A moment of blessed mourning, mercy, hunger, and thirst for righteousness that came as a result of two people, each in their own way and time, in their ordinary lives, haltingly trying to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with their God. What a lovely story. What a touching story of reordering, reimagining, not being trapped or consumed by the old order of things, nor being trapped or consumed by the pain of disorder from some of those things. But being ready to move into the reordering of things that God brings about when we let the Spirit move and guide and direct. It's beautiful and touching and sustaining and life-bringing. That's God's reorder. And so we can be blessed despite some of the circumstances of things. We can be blessed because there is reorder happening and will continue to happen in our midst. And God will take us through that if we're only ready and willing to follow. When reorder happens around us, will we be ready to participate? Amen.